doing all right. Hope you're keeping well, hope you're keeping safe, hope you're finding things to occupy yourselves with and you're not too stressed out. This is going to be the last, for the moment anyway, in a series looking at the origin of creatures in the woods, and today we're not going to look at a creature type, we're going to look at a character who is previously unmentioned in the woods but is a fairly significant feature in the Mythic Cycles expansion that I'm working on at the moment. And this is the character of Weithand, or Weithand, or Weithand, or however you want to say it, because this is fantasy, you pronounce it how you want to say it. The W-E-I-T-H-A-N-D-E, Weithand, I'm going to say. And Weithand is, he's not exactly a god character, because there really isn't a sense of religion in the woods. There's no particular deities. There are spirits and there are forces, and the major force, of course, being fate. So the fate weavers, the geomancers and the augurs have this ability to weave fate in a way that manipulates things, changes the things that are going to happen. So there's this idea of destiny and fate. The idea of weird, I guess, if you're going to take the old language, this idea that you have a particular destiny, you have a particular path that is set aside for you, that can be manipulated, it can be changed, but it's a kind of predestined thing that's going to happen to you, or set of things that are going to happen to you. And Weithand is really the embodiment of fate. He's the one who shapes the paths of the heroes who rise up, the mythic heroes who rise up to meet certain challenges, and orchestrates that. And he is this old man character, cloaked, hooded, with a floppy hat. Never quite see his face, and he's accompanied by ravens. And so you'll already be getting a sense that there are some very particular influences there. Notably Wayfon, who is the Saxon version of Odin, this kind of blind god, but who still sees, because he sees through his ravens, or he sees through the channels of fate, and he's somebody who makes things happen. He appears and he generally gifts an item or some knowledge, or he touches somebody and their lives change and they become destined to walk a certain path, whether that's good or ill. And so Weithand is very much rooted on that kind of figure. So there's the Odin, the Wayfon influence on there. Through that, there's also a bit of a Gandalf influence. He's the orchestrator. Weithand goes under other names. He's the Stormcaller, because he appears ahead of great turbulence that affects a society. Seeing Weithand in your settlement or in your society is not a positive sign. It's a sign that something big and unsettling is ahead, and so he's looking for people to deal with that situation. He's heralding that situation. So he's not a positive character in that sense. He's not a welcome character, just as Gandalf Stormcrow is not a welcome figure in Medicel. He's known as the harbinger of rough times. So Weithand has this sense that he's incredibly wise and he knows all things, and he provides counsel to those who will hear it, and he provides assistance, and he raises up these heroes to change things for the better, to make things work for the better. But he's not always a welcome or certainly not a comfortable figure. Gandalf, of course, is very heavily rooted in Odin, Weithand, but is also rooted in the classic British, if you want to say British, Brittonic, British, Welsh figure of Merlin. Merlin, of course, comes from Geoffrey and Monmouth's interpretation of a Welsh bard, very particular Welsh bard and prophet, and then has been rooted in the King Arthur story. And again, it's Merlin who orchestrates, it's Merlin who sort of raises Arthur and actually enables Arthur's birth in the first place, even though that is not under positive circumstances. There's all kinds of darkness and exploitation at the heart of that. It ends up in Arthur. So the line of fate, although the outcome eventually is good, the steps that have to go through are not necessarily good in the way that we'd understand it morally. So there's this sense of this line of fate having all kinds of shades of grey within it that are borne out by this ultimate aim. And so it's Merlin who shapes Arthur as the king and leads him and directs him and walks this line between human authority and the Christian edge to it as well, but between human authority over human society and the kind of the laws of nature, the tie-in with the old religions that are all about recognizing and working with nature, and he's trying to keep this balance between the two going. So there's that influence as well. So the name Weithand comes both from Wothan, the Saxon Odin, also from Wayland. So I've sort of taken the two and woven Weithand out of the two. Wayland being the Saxon version of Voland, the smith from Scandinavian legend. Smiths having this kind of mystical quality because they can take these raw elements and out of the earth they can forge these incredible items. We see a lot in the Irish and the Welsh sagas, particular the sagas. You know what I mean by a saga. It's a kind of heroic, long-ranging story to do with heroes. So it's like the Mabinogion and the Book of Invasions. They may not be known as sagas. Beowulf is known as a saga, of course, but they have that kind of saga mentality behind them. They're about long epic quests and dynasties, and the heroes that make up those things. And it's quite often it's the gifting of an item that brings the power of the hero, or the hero of the power is tied up with an item. So, for example, in the Mabinogion, there's a great series of quests that people have to go on for particular items to prove their worth. And these are all legendary items that are held by powerful people, and they're powerful because they hold these items. They're not just powerful and their power has enabled them to get these items. These items are the things that give them their power. So things like cauldrons that bring people back to life, and bulls whose horns have certain healing properties or aggressive properties, or all kinds of different things. And so the idea in Mythic Cycles is that the way that you become a hero, one of these mythical, great legendary heroes, is that Weithand picks you out and he gifts you an item, and there'll be a random generator, or you can pick based on the name that you want your character to have, will give you the properties of the item and what it does. So this idea of Wayland Smith creating these fantastical items ties in with Weithand being the fabricator or the gifter of these items. And Odin does this as well. He gifts the original Sword in the Stone myth is an Odin myth. And in fact, it's quite vividly portrayed, if I can find it in here. It's quite early on. Anyway, while I'm looking for it, it's quite, yes, there you go. No, that's Beowulf. It's quite vividly portrayed in, there you go, Hall of the Volsungs. So the Volsungs are, this is Alan Lee's depiction of Odin pushing a sword into the trunk of this great tree that forms the pillar of the centre of the Hall of the Volsungs. And the pulling out of that sword identifies the great hero in that saga. So that's a pre-echo of the sword and the stone myth. And actually, my model of Weithand is very much based on that illustration. It's the cloaked figure with the sword outstretched, maybe about to force it into a tree or a stone or an opponent. Who knows? So there's that sense of the item making the hero. Of course, Weithand is also, it's not that far away from White Hand, which is the name that Saruman took in Lord of the Rings. And Saruman was also very identified with machinery, with fabrication. He was the Astari whose interest was in creating items, creating things. So this is why he was so interested in rings. He was a forger of rings and of the blasting fires, and a creator of the Urukai. So he was very much about taking things and making other things out of them, fashioning them, constructing them. So that's a sense also that comes through in Weithand. He's about fabrication and about manufacturing things to his own ends, whether they're benign or not. In Mythic Cycles, Weithand, his base is the floating island. So there's another Merlin Arthurian reference for you. He lives in a broch in the centre of the floating isle, which is not actually floating in the air or on the sea. The floating isle is a sort of mythical other place that you can find yourself in if you get lost in the woods or lost in the mist. You can stumble through into the floating isle, and you're only permitted to do that if Weithand wants you to, if he's got a certain reason for bringing you to his country. And this is the other world that is used by the Faina Talamlar, who are the mythic heroes who are mentioned in the Mythic Cycles supplement. They're a kind of peacekeeping force. They're like the cavalry essentially in a western, so they're supposed to rock up in time to save the besieged defenders, whoever the defenders are. They work on behalf of the party which is being aggressed against. And they do this quite often by travelling into the floating isle and then out of the floating isle back into another place on the mortal realm. So it has this kind of it's not their seat of power. They have their Camelot, if you will, is in their great hall at Sash Hall, but they use the realm of this wizardy, gaudy, fatey creature who is manipulating them and enabling them to do the things that they need to do by letting them pass through his realm in order to get to other parts of the country. Just while I am mentioning all of the various hooded fates, it would be remiss of me not to talk about destiny. One of the 7 Endless in the Sandman series by Neil Gaiman. If you're not familiar with that series, again, this is another big inspiration on me. I recommend that you look into that and get familiar with that series because it's fantastic series of graphic novels. But again, he's more Grecian, I guess, in this idea that he's a blind chap chained to the book that has everything in it, that is continually writing itself. He can look ahead and see how things are going to come out. Destiny of the Endless, but I guess it would be the same kind of figure as Weithand, the sense that he's forever forever chained to knowing what is going to happen, and having to enable that one way or the other, that he maybe doesn't have a choice, or maybe he does have a choice and he just lets things go with it. These are the mysteries of fate. Do we know, if we know the outcome, are we able to change it, or is it forever written down and sealed, and that's the way that things are going to be, whatever we do? The mysteries of fate. Eh? So that's Weithand. I hope that's given you a bit of a sense into his character, and he's a fairly major player, as I say, in the Mythic Cycles supplement, which is nearly finished. I've been saying that for a couple of months now. I'm hoping that it will be out and available at Christmas, not hopefully just before Christmas. So keep in touch on the Facebook page to find out what's going with that. I hope it's been interesting. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about next week, but if you'd like to hear a bit more about some of these origin stories, perhaps we could talk a bit about creatures that are mentioned in folklore. I could go into the folklore elements, which bits I've used, which bits I have discarded, which bits I have added to and modified. But I feel like there are folklorists out there who would do a better job of talking about those creatures than me. On the subject of which, one of the I've been listening to a lot of podcasts recently. I just got into podcasts, I've not really done them before, and one that I've been listening to a lot is the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast, which is a phenomenal effort. It's fantastic retellings of Celtic folklore in a very down-to-earth, very relaxed, but very kind of traditional storytelling-y way of talking about those things. So I recommend that you check that out. Maybe I should ask Sian if she will chat to me and do some interviews on the various creature types, and then we can have a bit of a conversation about the various creatures and the way that I've used them in the woods. But I feel like somebody who's more of an informed folklorist should be involved in that process. And maybe there's someone out there, if any of you are informed folklorists or fancy having a chat for one of these videos about one of your favourite folkloric creatures and the way that they are featured in the woods, get in touch and let me know. And in the meantime, stay safe, and I'll see you next week.